All right, so we're going to open up the hearing to SB 256, and we'll hear from the prime sponsor, Senator Gaida. You are now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Bob Gaida, Senate District 2, and prime sponsor of Senate Bill 256. I'd be remiss if I didn't, for the record, congratulate the chair on his 59th birthday. For the record. And with that, we'll get underway with the business of the legislation. This legislation grew out of a committee on which I served. I believe Senator Waters served. A number of us looking at studying necessary revisions to the Site Evaluation Committee, the SEC, based on some inefficiencies and some other issues that have come to light. The bill is based on recommendations on the last page of that report, and which states that we create a study committee to examine the potential of removing the SEC as New Hampshire's main energy facility siting entity and replacing it with an Office of Energy Siting within the Department of Energy, newly formed, of course, and use the Public Utilities Commission as the final adjudicative body, since its role is adjudicative. So this committee would, if you will, in conformity to the report, would study the feasibility of replacing the SEC with an Office of Energy Siting within the Department of Energy to handle all preliminary siting activities and authorizing the Public Utilities Commission to act as the final adjudicative body. Would look at the current structure, process, authority, funding, and functions of the Site Evaluation Committee, the structure, process, authority, funding, and function of public bodies that oversee energy siting in other states, the role of the New Hampshire Department of Energy in any future energy siting process in New Hampshire, the ability of the Public Utility Commission to assume the adjudicative functions of energy siting. One of the problems with the SEC is that its workload is very inconsistent. It may go a year or two with nothing, and then it'll get 2 or 3 proposals. Funding that effectively is problematic, and staffing it as well. Hence, using the office of perhaps the newly formed Energy Department would be something we would certainly consider. But that's the nexus of this bill. That's the genesis of the bill, and it's certainly willing to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Questions from the committee? Senator Waters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Senator Gaida. I didn't get to say good morning yet.
Good morning, Senator.
Senator Perkins-Polk was introducing a bill elsewhere, and she asked if I would at least ask a couple questions. And she wanted to know, is the intent that the DOE would have permit granting authority for energy assistance systems and of the same scope as the existing SEC, or would that be an open question of the study commission?
I think that would be an open question. The concern was more about investigations and compliance issues. But the siting, I think, remains to be determined. I think that would be something the study committee would definitely look at as far as the permitting. Currently, well, I would say what was discussed in the committee was using the different agencies of the state that already do permitting. For example, DES, when you're siting a place, having them do their independent assessment, and then any other, DNCR perhaps, so that each department would fulfill its functions that it's already fulfilling. Rather than aggregate those and let them use the energy office as, if you will, a gathering point for all of these things for consideration for approval or disapproval by, I would guess, the PUC.
Thank you. And if I may, one of my own. I mean, I co-sponsored this, as you know.
Sure.
I thought it'd be good to have this conversation and to work on. But I guess this is kind of a question I think some people might raise, is that, this is a difficult subject, obviously, this siting. And so I think there's going to be, wouldn't you imagine there'd be some concern of people that if it is within a department, it might not be as, dispassionate or as uninfluenced as if it were an independent body. And I think that's something that we're going to have to answer.
Absolutely. Again, I do think I would agree with you. And again, my recollection of the hearings was that the role of energy would be more as the gathering function for all the different permits that are necessary, and that the actual adjudication of and the issuance of the permit would more likely be done by the PUC.
Thank you.
But that will definitely be a topic of intense review. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gray, any? No. One quick question. Has the executive branch looked at this at all? Have they weighed in on this?
Yeah, the then, I believe, acting commissioner of the new energy department actually came in support of this.
Thank you, Senator.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't have anybody here to, in support or against, and nobody here to speak. Does anybody want to weigh in on this at all? Please? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. All right, with that, we'll end the hearing on Senate Bill 256. We got a few minutes before we.
You want to exec that one?
Yeah, are you folks okay to exec on this? Senator Gray?
Move in, you want to do it now?
Yep.
I'll move into exec.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Is there a motion on the
I'll move to pass.
Second.
discussion? Seeing none, we'll, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. All right, pass. Who would like to take this out? Senator Gaida. All right, is there a motion to move out of exec?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, thank you. And we got a minute or two before your bill, or we all? Time is yours.
That may be the quickest bill in executive history.
Oh, we like to move them right along here, Bob, Senator. Let's see. What time is yours scheduled for today?
9:15, I think.
9:15. Okay, we got a minute or two.
Yeah. I think that's, isn't that what it is? That's what it's scheduled.
Yeah, what time? 9:15 for this one? All right. Oh, yeah, okay. That's fine. All right. Hey, French? Senator Waters, you are recognized.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Senator David Waters, District 4, to introduce Senate Bill 258, relative to the graves of African Americans alive during the period of American enslavement. The bill, as the Declaration of Purpose here has it, is to recognize the importance of preserving African American grave sites and to document, preserve them, and to identify descendants and descendant communities. I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about why we need to do this bill, and then I will go into the details of the legislation itself. Over the past decades, there's been a rediscovery of extraordinary examples of African American individuals and their burial sites in New Hampshire. And just to mention a few, Ona Marie Judge, justly famous because she escaped from the president's house in Philadelphia, where she was the so-called body slave of Martha Washington, and she escaped to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and was hunted by George Washington and his agents for decades afterwards. And she gave an interview late in her life, about 1840, about her experience in the Washington household, and that she still was subject to capture by the descendants of Martha Washington. And an extraordinary woman, extraordinary story, and her gravesite out in the woods in Greenfield, near where her house site was, recently rediscovered and in really quite appalling condition. Or Samson Battis, on whom I have done a great deal of research and publication. And in Deerfield, born about 1750, maybe in Rollinsford, enslaved by one of the settlers of Canterbury, the Moore family, and fought in the Revolutionary War, extraordinary service there. Sometime afterwards, gained his freedom and some land in Canterbury, and many, many descendants for many years. Had a burial ground, and he lived to 1852. He actually was the head of the color guard that escorted the governor to inauguration and to other events in Concord for many years. Now, his grave does have a Revolutionary War veteran marker, but it is interesting, buried way, way down in the bottom of the cemetery towards some swampy land, not too close to the other folks. And around it, there are many unmarked graves of other African Americans, and the Battis family burying ground is similarly neglected as well. Or just one little story in Deerfield. There's an enslaved man by the minister. Most ministers at this time, in an early period, had enslaved people serving them. And Jeff was found his place in Deerfield history because one Sunday he sent the minister's dog down the down the aisle of the church, wearing the minister's second best wig, and caused quite a stir and a comment on what Jeff may have thought of the minister. And he was buried just outside the walls of the Deerfield Old Cemetery up in the hill. And then when they moved the minister and the remains of the first settlers down to the new cemetery in Deerfield, they left old Jeff up in the woods. And again, a rather typical neglect and forgetting. You have a letter from Mr. Aldrich in Hancock about the extensive research and recovery of African American grave sites there. And then Milford, New Hampshire, which is justly famous in African American and American history because that was the residence of Harriet Wilson, who wrote the first novel by a woman of African descent ever published in the world, published in 1859. And one of the reasons you're getting a lot of letters today and not people here to testify is an extraordinary event in that a copy of her book, exceedingly rare, is being transported today from California to New Hampshire. It is coming home, and the members of Black Heritage Trail and other folks are greeting the woman who is bringing this volume back home to New Hampshire. But in Milford, there was a substantial community of enslaved and free people of color, centered around a man who was a barrel maker in the western part of town, and extensive grave sites there that some, long neglected as well. I think the example most people know about is Portsmouth, the recovery of the African burying ground. Hundreds of African Americans buried under the streets of Portsmouth, unearthed in a sewer project. I was there that day to see these coffins with the sewer lines running through them and the backhoe having pulled up bones and other remains, and an extraordinary effort by the descendant community in Portsmouth, because the individuals who may have been biological descendants from the hundreds buried there were unknown, to create the monument, to close the street, an extraordinary monument and a site. And it became something of a model of, this is what we need to do, is to have a descendant community involved so that these graves can be recovered, documented, and preserved. So to the bill itself, and I'll just say that, you know, I look around here, and all of your districts have these grave sites. There are probably hundreds in New Hampshire, given the extensive history of enslavement in the state. So what the bill does is it basically builds on existing statute. We have existing statute about the treatment and preservation of burial grounds, and the process that people need to go through if they wish to restore one or to mark one. And of course, all burying grounds are already in statute, have some protections. If a highway project or a developer comes upon one, what needs to be done, and so forth. What this bill does is it adds a particular process where, if an African American site is identified or discovered, then it adds to that process a consultation with the descendant community if there are no living descendants who can be identified as is current state statute. And here it lists the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire, or another designated representative by the municipality. In Portsmouth, for example, they decided to use the Seacoast African American Culture Association and establish a particular city body that was populated by members of the descendant community. So there would be choice in the municipality about who they want to designate, and they would be consulted. If it turned out that there was investigation of the remains and determined, as was sometimes the case, that there was also native heritage in the individuals buried there, well, then we have existing statute that is governed by federal law on Native American graves. So that's why there's a reference down here in the bottom of page 1 that that's the case. That's what kicks in, because by federal law and by state statute it must as well. So on page 2, it outlines the procedures of identification, restoration, and preservation. Then, you know, as is sometimes the case with gravestones that have gone missing from our historic burial grounds, if there's not an appropriate place of return, then as is sometimes done now, the stone or other items may end up in a historical society. And the New Hampshire Division of Cultural Resources, which offers advice already on these matters, has expressed its willingness to help as well in this regard, too. Then lastly, the last section here deals with what remains and other items may be in collections. I think we all know of the history of Native American remains being brought into archaeological and anthropological collections. It's one of the reasons we have the National Native American Graves Protections and Restoration Act, and why these remains. And I was the NAGPRA officer at UNH supervising the return of remains and grave goods that had been in the archaeological collections at UNH. And so that process, I think people are familiar with, but there's also a long history of African American bodies being exhumed for dissection. There's history of that at the Dartmouth Medical School for decades in the late 18th and early 19th century. And on other occasions where people collected skulls to determine the inferiority of the African American race, and these skull collections were in many museums and many educational institutions in the United States, even till recent times. So this is an opportunity to ask the institutions, we know you scoured your collections for Native American remains because you had to under federal law. Now please check to see if you have any of these items. And if they do, then here's a process, working with the descendant community to see what would be a respectful disposition of those remains. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just conclude by saying that, as you know from the article I sent and some of the other communications, there is an increasing national concern over this issue, not just because of the discovery of the massive grave site in Wall Street in New York and Portsmouth burial ground, but in many cities and in north and south. And so there's a growing awareness that there's an opportunity for the states here, and it's basically you know, people whose humanity was not recognized when living, I think, deserve our respect where they now rest. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gotti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. A couple of questions.
Yes.
On Romans 7 on page 2, near the top, it cites work conducted after 2012. What's the significance of 2012? I mean, is there some...
I think that is, I will check on it. I think we had that date because that was a date when we passed the other protections for burials. And procedures for that. But I'll double check on that. But as I'm looking at that, I believe that is the case, that we passed some legislation then.
Before my time.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Follow up?
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I go back to the methodology on the fiscal note, I'm a little bit confused because it says the bill contains a violation penalty. And I haven't seen that in the bill. So I'm wondering, is this an error or?
Well, existing statute has penalties and violations for the disturbing or removal of burial grounds. That's already in statute. So when I read that, I assumed that they were referencing to the fact that we already have those penalties. I mean, you know, if a developer or somebody or a homeowner goes out and decides to bulldoze or dig up, or, you know, out in the woods some land is being developed, this is where all these burial grounds often suddenly pop up because there's a stone wall, and that if you destroy it at that point or remove it, you are subject to penalties. So, you know, that is existing statute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So would this then be, would this be something that a developer that's looking to build homes or workforce housing or whatever, would this be another step in terms of any formal permitting process, or in other words, how does this fit into that?
Well, thank you, Senator. It's already in statute.
Okay.
If you come across one of these things, you just stop work, and there's a procedure. The historical resources in the town, and they know what to do. And I mean, the principle here is that burial grounds are not the property of the surrounding property owner. The burial ground is actually the property of the descendants, and if the descendants or the community cannot be identified, then the town has the option of taking it on as it's under its care, or not. But nonetheless, it is the property rights in that are what are being protected.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Just one silly one. A few years back, I think or maybe a year back, I seen where an individual was going around cleaning up grave sites. He was actually polishing them. Would that be penalized?
I'm sorry, as I said.
So a gentleman who was actually going around cleaning up tombstones and stuff like that, it wouldn't be penalized for doing such a thing?
Well, what we have already in statute, that if you want to go onto somebody's private cross somebody's private property to reach a burial ground, that you have to go through a process which is already in statute to inform and to have consent for the way that you're going to approach it, and you have to have worked with the town and then had a public posting of the work that you want to do. So that's already in statute, because we need to protect people's property rights, you know, of the surrounding property. So that's why we put in statute those procedures to make sure that that's covered. So again, this is nothing different. I mean, the basics here is that, you know, if it can be identified as African American, then you work with the descendant community so that things are done appropriately. That's the heart of that. And the other part is museums, educational institutions, take a look. See if you have any of these remains in your collections. And if you do, let's get them respectfully dealt with.
Yep. Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.
We only have one other person who, Rustin Chester, in opposition. Are you here? Don't want to speak? All right, with that, we will close the hearing on SB 258. Next one, Representative Gray. And the chair recognizes Senator Gray to introduce.
Thank you, Senator Gravard. I am James Gray, Senator representing District 6, Alton, Barnstead, Gilmanton, New Durham, Rochester, and Farmington. This bill, Senate Bill 261, right?
Yes, evident.
Relative to net metering participation, this was put in by constituent request. Mr. Campbell is behind me, knows much more about it than I, so he will help me out by answering a lot of your questions. One of the things that I found in this bill was that it could be a year before a person would be reimbursed for net metering expenses and the amount of energy that he provided. And to me, that seemed, Mr. Campbell wanted 1 month, and I thought that might be a little excessive on. So the bill in front of you does go to 3 months. It also corrects a little bit of the language in there, making it, or I should say, recognizing the things that we've learned in net metering over the last year or two. Mr. Campbell has worked hard with Eversource and the other energy producers. And again, he is probably the better one to speak to the bill. If you have questions of me, I'd be happy to try and answer them. But I think you're just delaying Mr. Campbell from getting up here.
Seeing no questions, thank you, Senator. And we'll call on Mr. Brown first, seeing how you're opposed and wants to speak. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mark Brown. I'm the Executive Director of New England for Consumer Energy Alliance, or also known as CEA. CEA is a nationwide association made up of energy producers and energy consumers, working towards advancing all of the above energy and environmental policies that will lower energy costs for everyone. CEA supports actions that thoughtfully advance our nation towards a cleaner, more environmentally responsible energy future. We believe that responsible policies always consider the needs of consumers while leveraging and supporting the development of state-of-the-art technologies to improve our environmental stewardship, aiding in the continued reduction of all emissions. On behalf of CEA, I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today on Senate Bill 261. Just a few questions and comments. This bill seems to violate the spirit of net metering. The whole idea of net metering was created to provide compensation to people that own solar panels back when solar panels were far more expensive, decades ago. So it would allow them to sell their electricity back to the grid to kind of offset and defray those costs. This bill seems to remove the requirement that they would have to provide load behind the meter. Second, the one question I have is, if this bill were to pass and it were to proliferate, would this create an administrative burden for utilities when it comes to their billing systems? One of the things we heard frequently in the docket on net metering is that frequent or periodic changes to billing systems, it's an expensive endeavor for utilities. So I guess the question I have is, would this create an administrative burden? Would this increase the cost of the billing systems that utilities provide that would then be borne by, obviously, all ratepayers and those who are not participating in net metering? Which kind of brings me to the next point is, there's been an ongoing docket at the PUC since 2016. And it's my understanding that we're pretty close to getting the results of a study that the commission has asked for to talk about the value of distributed energy resources and what they provide, don't provide, kind of heard a lot of things over the years about transmission costs and distribution costs and all that sort of thing. And there's supposed to be some type of definitive study that's going to be complete soon. So I think it would be prudent for this committee and the legislature to kind of wait for that study to be complete before we move forward and advancing, net metering policies. And one thing I'll add is, if you're not producing energy, if you're not consuming energy behind the meter, then essentially you're just a generator. So you don't really need net metering. And solar generators would still be, they should be able to receive a 26% investment tax credit, and that's a tax credit, not a reduction. I mean, a deduction. And also RECs. So there's still incentives out there, to kind of, help systems along so that they'll be able to move forward in New Hampshire. But net metering, it's a bad policy. It's always been a bad policy. It's regressive. It benefits those that receive the compensation, generally foist costs onto those that don't. There's a number of studies that show that. I'd be happy to provide it to the committee, but not any of them that you want to see. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
I'd like to see all those reports.
You want to see some of those studies?
Yes, please.
Absolutely.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, and thank you for your testimony. So just to your point, how this might subvert what we've done in net metering, it does seem to me that bottom of page 1 there really undoes what the chairman's bill tried to do on net metering and 315 on community aggregation. Would that be the case?
Well, yeah. If you don't have to provide, if you don't have to be a group host, and provide benefits to consumers who can't take advantage for geographic reasons or whatever of net metering, and you don't have to provide load, you're just a generator. I mean, if you're not consuming power, you're just a generator at that point.
Thank you.
Is that what you're asking, Senator?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Donna, do you want to speak?
Thank you very much. For the record, Donna Gamache with Eversource Energy. We are not taking a position on this bill today, and I will be very brief. I have spoken with Senator Gray and with Packy Campbell, who's been spoken about previously. We just wanted to say that I'm not going to speak today to the policy of changing the net metering policy. We've spoken to this committee and in the House on net metering policy plenty of times over the years. I think we're at the point now that we believe that you as policymakers working with the governor's office, you can figure that piece out. So I'm not going to address that. But I did want to talk to the administration of the billing and providing that credit back. Currently, we do it annually, and it is a manual process. So we assume that if this bill were to pass, even if this bill weren't to pass, no, let me just take that back. That's not what I meant. If this bill passes, there will be more people who participate. Even if more people do not participate, instead of providing that credit annually, we would have to provide it either monthly or quarterly, however that would be. We would either have to increase the number of employees we have doing the manual work, or we would have to upgrade our billing system. I have checked with our billing folks, and they are very clear that they cannot give me an exact cost of what it would be, either one would be. I asked for just a bandwidth, and they said it would have to be designed. So, but what they did say, it would at least be $1 million. So, Having said that, what we are here today to ask for is if you do determine that this bill should pass, we would love to provide you with some language that provides us cost recovery for whatever the increases in costs are for the billing portion of it. And that's my testimony today. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Any questions from the committee? Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning.
Good morning.
Just, again, I have my little sheet from Senator Perkins-Coker because she's introducing other bills.
Okay.
But she did want to ask, just basically to follow up on what you said about the settlement of accounts, so that you generally now you have an annual settlement of accounts, and that's why you do your reimbursement annually, and that this would create the problems that you've described.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And again, we want to be able to recover the costs associated with meeting. If you pass this bill, it would be, a law that we have to meet. We want to be able to recover the costs associated with meeting that.
If I may follow up,
Oh, yeah.
and of course, if your costs go up, they're recoverable, so it's other folks who are paying for them.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Under Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a way of allocating the increased cost to the net metering population exclusively from the general ratepayer base?
That is an interesting concept. I would have to take that back. I'm sure anything's possible. Let me get back to you on that, how
That'd
that
be
would
good. I
work.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Under Gray.
To my way of thinking, that if I have a business and I am doing something manual, as I work with that system, eventually, I might make it automated as things change. And certainly nothing is changing more than energy, net metering, and other things. So, I look at this as a cost of doing business. Is there any validity in what I'm talking about?
I guess, let me just try to answer it this way, and if I don't answer it correctly, I apologize, and I'll do my best after. If you pass this bill, then yes, it is considered the cost of doing business. So what we want to ensure, because everything that we do we are a regulated utility, and it has to be approved by the Public Utilities Commission. They have to ensure that what we do, we've done it to the least cost. We've met the requirement and do it least cost, that we've done it prudently. And so as a result, we don't want there to be any confusion, and that at some point, all those costs wouldn't be recovered.
If the state goes to what I'm going to refer to as in and out meters, okay? Meters that talk about how much you've used, but it also, records how much you've put out there. Wouldn't that also require a lot of these same changes in your program?
So you're talking about smart meters. If we were to move forward with installing smart meters, we currently do not have smart meters. We have just the kind of meters, we just upgraded it about 6 years ago to the type of meters that allows our meter readers just to drive by and be able to do your billing. That's all we have right now. There have been discussions at the PUC about maybe having more smart meters, but currently today in state law, it's an opt-in requirement. Given that we have over 500,000 customers in the state of New Hampshire, it hasn't been easy to get to that. So I don't know exactly where those discussions are at the PUC, but I can check. But would that change this? I think it would. I think it might be easier. Let's be clear. Net metering was the reason net metering even came into being, the idea started in the 70s. It took hold in New Hampshire in the late 90s because that technology didn't exist. And it was a way of just netting out your use, what you generated plus your use. There's technology today that you could today install a meter and you would know exactly what did you use, what did you produce, and it would make it easier for the utility to probably manage those billing systems. I don't know if it would mean it, there may still be a cost associated with it, with those billing systems, but those meters are more expensive. And if you required that a net metering customer install those meters, we've talked with many of them about it. It is more costly for them, so it's not something they're looking forward to do.
Somebody's got to absorb the costs.
Correct.
Senator Gray.
But unless I go to, again, when I'm, you can call them smart meters, I like to call them in and out
That's
to
fine,
give the public a little information about what they're really doing. But to calculate how much energy is being produced by solar or other devices, don't I have to go to those meters to take advantage of those credits and other things?
I would have to have somebody here to answer that question, how we actually do it, because we clearly, our net metering customers, a lot of them do not have those meters today, and we somehow managed to figure out what that credit is. So I believe it's based on the net, but I'm not exactly sure how they do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one question, Donna, if I may. With regard, does this undermine 315 that we passed? Does it screw up what we just passed last year on net metering?
Nobody has told me that it does that. So I could double check just to make sure that we've dotted our i's and crossed our t's, but I have not gotten that feedback yet.
Okay, in the spirit of it, I
Yes.
guess that's what was brought up.
Oh, okay.
It-
I mean, understood. I think what you're probably getting at is in House Bill 315, all the different stakeholders came together, and people who necessarily didn't want to support the expansion that happened, everybody kind of came to the table and said, let's do this and put it to bed for a while. And it's not, obviously, if you pass another bill.
Right, I just didn't
But-
want to undo something that we've already, and I
I
didn't
don't
see
know
that
that.
at first.
Yeah, I'll check. I will check for you.
Okay. Senator Waters, you?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, in terms of the metering issue, I'm trying to recall from the LEAP committee we had last summer, where there was some discussion from the utilities about the potential cost of shifting to newer meters, and it was many millions of dollars, as I recall.
Very expensive.
Yeah.
It is very expensive, and that's if we put it on all of our customers who opted in.
Yeah.
So I think there's a subset, and I'm sure they're not exactly the same meter either, but a more technologically advanced meter that could be used for net metering would not be something that we'd install on all of our customers.
So, yeah, just one more. And I know, you said the very first thing is, I'm not here to talk about net metering, right? But now we're asking questions about it. Just to follow up on the chairman's question, it just seems to me that the issue around net metering had always been the distribution costs and how that was calculated in relationship to net metering. I mean, that's what we've been kind of wrangling on for years and trying to come to some understanding of in the bills that were passed last session and then also in the LEAP committee last summer. So that would it be fair to say that in this bill that kind of reopens that notion of who participates in net metering and then therefore the issue of the relationship of these participants to the distribution costs?
I think you raise a very good point. Again, I didn't intend to speak to that here, but I do think as policymakers, generally speaking, that is an issue. And the more that these types of policies grow, we're seeing it in our sister states. Obviously, Eversource is in Massachusetts and Connecticut, and they've moved more rapidly towards some policies. And there's a great eye looking to what are the costs now to not only the transmission system but the distribution system, and who bears those costs. So it's something for the future. New Hampshire's not there yet, but it is something to think about in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much, Tom. Josh, you want to weigh in on this?
I don't know if it would benefit the committee to hear from Mr. Campbell first, or I can testify now if you prefer. I believe your discretion.
We'll hear from you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the department, happy 29th birthday.
Me? Yes.
At any rate, all kidding aside, for the record, Josh Elliott, Director of the Division of Policy and Programs of the New Hampshire Department of Energy. The department is not taking a position on this bill. However, we would like to highlight several concerns Sort of touched on them between the testimony of the previous two testifiers, as well as some of the questions to the committee. So there's really two issues at play here. There's both the billing frequency and then there's the actual net metering requirements that are set in statute and rule. Currently under PUC Rule 903.02 subsection D requires that customer generators have a minimum of 20% of the load behind the meter in order to participate, or they have to participate as a group host and share those benefits. This is based on legislatively directed docket of DE 16-576, as well as which resulted in order 26,029, and then rules have been put into place based on that order, have the full effect of law. As sort of been mentioned earlier, as part of that docketing process, there were a number of studies that were commissioned as part of trying to figure out what that rate should be and what the requirements should be. As I've mentioned in earlier testimony, we've had one study that has been completed. The second one, which is the VDRS, the Value of Distributed Energy Resources study, is ongoing. We should have it, as noted in the fiscal note, should be completed by late spring of 2022, which should answer a lot of questions, or at least move the discussion forward so everybody's on the same playing field in terms of what the parameters are, what the information is, and go through that process. So the legislation that you have before you sort of changes all of that. If you're looking at the bill lines, page 1, lines 20 through page 2, line 13, it eliminates that minimum consumption requirement and eliminates the group host requirement. I think we've heard from previous testifiers, it sort of essentially it removes the net from net metering. You're just metering now. You remove the customer from customer generator. You're just a generator. The concern is that default service that that the folks who participate in so I was like traditional net metering as currently exists, that rate was designed for within these limited circumstances. It wasn't designed for just pure generation. You know, if you're a generator, you go through LEAP or you register with ISO New England and you participate as a generator. And there's a number of other requirements that come along with that, as well as you don't get paid default service. I'm sure if we were to offer default service to all the generators in the state, you'd have a line a mile long of everybody looking to sign up. They don't get paid default service rate. They get paid the wholesale rates, there's a significant difference between those two rates. So I think both Mark Brown kind of touched on this. This is premature. If the state would like to go into this direction, we don't have all the information to know if this is the right direction to go in. Again, with VDRS, study still ongoing. Once that is complete, the PUC will again look at this rate. There'll be a full adjudicated process, people bringing information, there'll be a large discussion, and again, we'll have all of that information to determine. They could come to the conclusion that yes, it's perfectly fine and you should be able to do this as it's laid out in this bill, or they may say the opposite. We don't have enough information to say what is the correct way to proceed. And by correct way, I mean to say not shift. We talk a lot about cost shifting, right? We don't know. We have some sense, but in terms of New Hampshire specific information, we don't know, which these studies are designed to address. So something like this could exacerbate cost shifting if it does exist, or to the extent that it does exist. On the second piece, I know there's the billing question as well, whether or not, and you can see based on the statute and based on the existing net metering requirements, in theory, you should only need to get paid out once a year, right? If you've got at least 20% of the load behind the you're consuming at least 20% behind the meter, you know, you're going to have some carry forward that's going to get cashed out. But for most folks, they're not rolling over enormous balances. There's probably a little bit at the end where it makes sense and it's okay. It's an extra little benefit at the end to get cashed out, and that makes sense to do it on an annual basis when you have these sorts of requirements in place. Again, based on the docket. If you're a pure generator, then yes, it makes sense that you would want to get paid on a more frequent basis. I think Donna Gamache highlighted the concern of the cost to this. You know, minimum of $1 million for Eversource. I don't know what the cost would be for Unitil or the co-op or anybody else, or Liberty, excuse me, to do this. And that's a concern of the department, of where, depending on how many, if this bill were to pass, how many people then sign up to do this, how many people essentially function in this way, you run into that billing question, and that would be, and I can understand why the utilities want it as recoverable from the ratepayers. That has some concerns with the department, especially if you're asking the ratepayers to pick up the tab for a subsection of the population. And I think you had hinted, both you and Senator Waters had hinted at that concern earlier about cost shifting. If the rest of the ratepayers are expected to make up the cost for these changes, for the software changes, so people can be billed, or excuse me, paid out more frequently. That's not to say, I don't know if the needle could be threaded there in terms of finding a solution that has current producers get paid out more frequently. Maybe it's and I don't know the utility system, so I can't speak to it, but I don't know if there's a potential solution of where there's sort of an estimate and then there's a reconciliation, or an estimate quarterly and then there's a reconciliation at the end of the year. The folks from the utility should be able to speak to the feasibility of that, but it's just a random thought. But at any rate, I will stop there and happy to answer questions, or attempt to answer
So the
questions.
study that you had mentioned, that we're still waiting on is from the PUC. What is?
Oh, sorry. So it's the VDERS, or the Value of Distributed Energy Resources Study. This is to look at the there's a lot of to look at the transmission side of it. Are we really reducing transmission costs, and to the extent that they are, how are they reduced, and a number of other variables included in that.
And under this study, we would know whether this bill would be feasible or not.
It would probably answer some of the questions, not necessarily all the questions. When you take it in totality, that's what the docketing process is for, is to go through that adjudicated process. All the parties bring information. There's testimony. There's people bring the information to the table, and then it's adjudicated. They go through it's sort of like the legislative process. If you think of it that way, right? Things get vetted. People bring information. Everyone tries to come to a conclusion on something.
And the studies due when?
It would be late spring of 2022. And again, then we go to the next steps after that. But at least all the information in theory should be, or at least that has been mandated through the docket, will be collected anyway to that point.
Great. Questions from the committee? Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony. So, and perhaps to put it in simple terms, what you're saying is that we carefully regulate generators of electricity for all kinds of reasons, and that we have made some accommodation for certain kinds of generators, if they're custom-meter generators or now net metering, community net metering, aggregation, whatever, because we want to be very careful about the reliability and our sources of generation and the cost for distribution of that power. Is that why we have what we have now?
Yes, I think that is a fair assessment.
Thank you.
Senator Gaddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Josh. Welcome back.
Thank you, Senator.
I had asked Donna earlier if it's possible to segregate any additional costs and assign them to the net metering population. Would the department at this point, or are you aware of any limitations that would prevent us from doing that?
I would have to bring it, again, not to give you I don't have an answer off the top of my head. I would like to bring that back to the folks of the department. I would want to make sure that I'm not giving an incorrect answer. I have a gut thought about it, but I'd rather not accidentally give the wrong answer.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Waters.
Yeah, in light of what Mr. Brown has told us and Senator Guyda's question, would it be fair to say, Josh, that this is really at the heart of what the LEAP study committee did last summer, was look at these questions, and that all the information from the utilities that we received there from ISO New England, and then a report that Chairman Vose wrote, gives a pretty good sense of what we know and what we don't know, and what at least at this point, that was recommended as a guide for issues about net metering. And isn't it the case that at the end of that report, Chairman Vose says we should be very cautious at this point in making any further changes?
Yes, it is. As you mentioned, it's very complex. That's sort of it's a parallel issue, although there's a lot of intersections between that as well and net metering here. But yes, it is very complex. And yes, I think that is a correct assessment.
Thank you.
Further questions? Senator Guida.
Thank you. More of a comment, if I may. So, the concern I have is that a ratepayer is essentially loaning the utility money when they're not getting that money back in the course of an entire year. And to me, that's problematic. I also have a concern that, when I go to buy a car, I can buy a Cadillac or a Volkswagen, right? So when I choose my energy setup for my home, right, I can choose what I would call a traditional, or I can go for net metering.
Mm-hmm.
The market provides the option to the consumer. In this case, the utility is not providing that option, and the cost of that option, while as of yet unquantified, okay, I think should go to the consumer that chooses to buy that option. And that's the direction I'd like to see this thing proceed. Thank you.
Yes, that's a very succinct way of putting that. Again, I will check with folks at the department to see if there is a mechanism. I have a couple of thoughts, but I would rather, talk to the people who actually who know the finer details of this as to if that is feasible, and if it is feasible, what's the correct path to get there.
Thank you, Josh. Any further questions? Seeing none. And so now, Becky Campbell. Thank you, and we left you to be the last speaker because nobody else wants to speak on this, so we're giving you the last word.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come in and speak. I don't know what the COVID rules are, but I do have flyers if you'd like to see it. Part of this talk will be about just the changes in technology that require the clarification. But right out of the gate, I just want to be clear that this is no change to current law at all.
They can pass it out for you.
Thank you. We're not looking to redo net metering. We're not looking to reopen that debate. I'm a small business owner. I own 6 or 7 small businesses here in New Hampshire, and I've seen my electric bill in the last 2 years go up 18%. We have a supply problem with electricity in the state of New Hampshire, and under current law, we're allowed to be custom generators. Yeah. Sure, absolutely. Do you mind if we shut the lights off? Just is that weird?
That's weird.
A little bright.
Is it?
Yeah. I had a bad head injury, so it's.
Well, we can lower. Take one off.
I can still see. Are you okay?
Where are you?
I don't know if it affects the camera.
It might affect the camera. Yeah. Just put one over us. Is that
I guess
okay?
I'll be all right.
That's a
Okay.
compromise.
Yeah. No problem. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. It's more of honestly, it kind of served the purpose. That's wicked bright though. But I mean, I'm assuming these are LED lights.
I don't know. We might need them for our cameras. So.
Okay, no problem. So I'll start. I'm a small business owner. I actually have 38 trackers that are deployed. I have 724 kilowatts DC on the stick. I started my first project in solar under the old net metering rules, and I have 2 projects that are grandfathered under those rules. I don't seek to change any of the rules that we have today, and I expect my projects that I've already done to be grandfathered under the existing rules today. So I will produce this year about 1,188 kilowatts of solar. And that solar will bring down prices for everyone. It will not cost shift. I don't know that I buy this argument of cost shifting. It's essentially the same as, and I don't mean to be smart, but shutting off the lights. I'm literally producing solar, and it's like installing LED lights. It's being more efficient. I'm using less power in my businesses. And yes, of course, I'm a customer generator. I saw everybody testify, oh, he's trying to be a generator with no meter. I'm customer generator. I'm a customer generator. Of course I consume more than 20% behind the meter. Of course that makes the most sense. If I consume it behind the meter, it offsets 29 cents. If I send it to the grid, I get 8.8 cents. Or if I'm less than 100 kilowatts, I get about 12 cents. So you have monetized these net metering credits. There's a limit on the size of the system that you can have. Those limits are in place. There's a limit to 1 megawatt if you want to get the default rate. There's a limit to 100 kilowatts if you want to get the default rate plus transmission plus a quarter of distribution. Those safeguards are all in place. I'm changing none of that. This is a typical Eversource bill. The reason why I originally asked for this to be monthly is I thought it was easier. As you can see, this bill says negative $74. There is a multi-million-dollar computer system that calculates exactly what my negative is, and they do it on the billing statement. So quite honestly, I thought that would be administratively very easy because I already have the data. There's no calculation that needs to be done. There's no tweaking of a multi-million-dollar computer system. If it costs you $1 million to cut, I don't know, any amount of checks quarterly, I'd love to be in that business. My wife can sit down at QuickBooks and cut 25 checks at a push of a button and then stamp it and print it. And I would submit to you that this is the classic example of little small business, big utility, big lobbyist organization. I'm coming in, I'm going to compete with them. I'm going to be a customer generator that makes a significant amount of electricity. And I'm doing that under the current law. The only problem I have is I'm not changing the current law, I'm changing the rules. This LSR is filed as a result to a rule waiver denial by the Department of Energy. This is where everything has a story. I basically said, hey guys, the law says it will set up a reasonable period for you to get paid. Under rulemaking, the reasonable period was once a year. As Representative Guida said, why can I not get paid my $74 for the 2 months at $74? Or the 1 month at $74? I'm fine with the quarterly payment. I think it's the same thing. If you get your third billing cycle of the year and it's negative, they mail a check or they send an ACH. No big deal. I can't imagine a cost study that's going to tell me a utility that cuts hundreds of thousands of checks a year can't cut a few checks quarterly. I have no sympathy for that statement, and I would hope that no reasonable person would. So I'm just asking that I'm willing to compromise with the utilities and get paid quarterly. The data is the data. It's already there. I think it's a very reasonable thing. I have a friend who jokes with me about Popeye the Sailor Man, and Wimpy would say, I'll gladly pay you for a cheeseburger on Tuesday that I can eat today. That's not fair. It's fundamentally unfair. I'm making this economic investment, and I should get paid according to the current law, period. This doesn't change anything that's in law. All it would do is make those rules that require you to get paid annually to be changed to quarterly. That's it. I think that's a very reasonable thing. When I, as a former legislator, I should probably told you that at the opening, was a legislator for 2 terms in the House, had a great time there. I think whenever you have an issue, just take that pendulum and you swing it a little bit. Just a little bit. All this does is say that instead of annual, I want to get paid quarterly. That's it. The second part of this bill, where everyone's talking about this 20% consumption, of course I'm going to consume 20%. I would be surprised if I didn't. However, I would point out to the committee that there might be a situation where a user might not. So in my situation, I own 5 mini storage facilities. That's one of my business, mini storage. I've been encouraged by towns and community to build solar, large area, big roof areas, big stuff. I do this very unique technology that causes a lot of production. On those facilities, I could build enough that I wouldn't consume 20%. I would point out factually that under the rules, the 20% consumption is if you're over 100 kilowatts, less than 1 megawatt. There is no such rule under the 100 megawatts. So I would say to you that we should just have the same rules that we have for under 100 megawatts, under 100 kilowatts, up to 1 megawatt. All I'm looking is not have a difference in this fine. So if I had to go to 150 kilowatts to meet my need, I wouldn't automatically have to be a group net metering. So my problem is twofold. If you require me to prove that I'm consuming 20%, as Representative Gray pointed out, there's no data point for that. There's nothing on this bill that tells you how much I consumed behind the meter. I've got an unprovable fact. So it's not that I'm consuming 20%, I probably am. I just can't prove it to my lender. So I have to prove to my lender that I'm eligible to get net metering credits in order to build my solar facility. Because guess what? I'm not a billion-dollar company. I'm not a New York hedge fund. And under the current law, you support New York hedge funds more than you support Packy Campbell, a local entrepreneur, a blue-collar entrepreneur that's working hard to be successful. And you should support me. And so should the House, and so should the governor's office. because I'm just supporting the current intent of the current legislation. The current legislation is net metering. Respectfully, if you ask the Consumer Alliance, do they like net metering? They're going to say, no, we don't like net metering, period. They wish it wasn't here. Get rid of it. That's the current law. I'm asking you to keep the current law in place. Through rulemaking, they put in a poison pill that undermines the current law. I can do this. I can group net meter. I can do every project that I have in planning right now. It's not going to stop any project. I still want you to pass this bill. I probably shouldn't tell you that. But what it's going to require me to do is get paid once a year. Not fair. It's going to require me to have enough capital and enough money that I can afford to spend all this money and get my paycheck once a year. Other than being a state rep, I've never seen that. But in the mega farm problem with the 20% is I can't prove to the bank that I'm even going to be eligible 3 years from now, because every year there's a litmus test. They're saying, did you consume 20%? And I have no data. I have no meter to say, yes, I did. So that's why I have a fundamental problem with a rule that puts a requirement that's unprovable. The burden of group net metering, you want to talk about cost shifting, imagine that you're putting that on me, a small business owner. Good morning, Brenda. I'd like you to now, my wife Brenda, 25 years, I'd like to make it to 26. I'd like you to bill 240 customers net metering credits. I'd like you to set up a billing system where we can monthly get paid by participating in group net metering. Hey, Eversource, now you gotta manage. I can do 7 megawatt projects. That's my statutory limit. That's all I can do with Eversource. It's already on the books. There's no additional cost. Someday we're going to hit that limit. Do we hit that limit a little quicker if we make these 2 changes? Maybe. I would submit to you that if we can hit it quicker, that's a good thing. And then we're going to have the conversation about where do we go with net metering after we hit the statutory limit. I apologize for being so passionate about this, but it's unfair for you to make me take on the administrative burden of group net metering in order to be a customer generator. I am a customer generator. And it pains me to see so many people confused on that. I think the rule waiver that I requested was denied because it was a fundamental misunderstanding from the Department of Energy. They thought I was just going to sell power to the grid, light bulb in the field. No. Of course, I want to go out and find businesses that are consuming this. And the flyer that you have there, you have car washes, you have car dealerships, you have commercial real estate offices. That's what we're doing. And if I can go to those business owners and say, hey, if you have a surplus, you're going to get paid monthly, they're going to want to put more solar on. They're going to want to overpower their meter. And they should be able to do that because there's plenty of limits, folks. If I have a 400 amp 3-phase 208 service, big service, the most I can put on that is 83 kilowatts. There's no like, oh, we're going to open Pandora's box. It just doesn't work. You can't build all these huge systems that they're worried about. If you want to do a mega farm, I'm not aware that anyone's done 1 megawatt because it's financially unviable. You have to be next to 3-phase power. So, for instance, if I have a Christmas tree farm or a blueberry farm, which is one of my plans, I'm a gentleman farmer where I live, and I happen to have a big industrial use next door, probably won't consume 20%. But shouldn't that farmer be able to be a customer generator and send power under the railroad tracks? Literally got an easement to go under the railroad tracks, and we're sending it to the 200 kVA transformers that feed the industrial park. So if Eversource pays me 8.8 cents, and then that industrial user pays them 20, how is that a bad deal for Eversource? I don't see it. I don't buy this cost shifting argument. If you buy the cost shifting argument, when I turn the lights off, I cost shift. I just cost shifted. That's all I'm doing is turning the lights off in my businesses and other businesses. The net metering rules are a burden on small businesses. So I go to an aggregator and I say, okay, will you do these net metering credits? So I've done a little research. For example, there's one company that says, you know what? For a penny, we'll take all the net metering credits that you generate. So you've created a taxatory scheme that's 11.36% of my revenue. Why would you take a customer's 11.3% for making that investment and send it to big capital? That's fundamentally flawed in that rule. And then they told me that rule has the force of law because it was part of an adjudicated hearing, part of legislation that was passed to say you make net metering rules. A very unusual thing. You delegated to a state agency to make law. I don't know how that happened. Further, the current law, you can read it. It says you may participate in group net metering. It doesn't say you shall. It doesn't say you have to. It doesn't say unless you do X, Y, and Z. It says you may. I'm not trying to undo the program. But I would submit to you that if I don't participate in that program, that the administrative burden of me not being in that program on the utilities is far less than them cutting me a check quarterly. With that, I'll take questions.
Questions from the committee? I have a question. With regards to when you built all these, when did the rules change?
2017, I believe, but I think that's a matter of public record.
And when did you build these things?
The first one I built was on Staples. I built it prior to 2017. I actually built it in 2017, but we got the interconnection agreement prior to the rules change.
And you mentioned it earlier that you're already grandfathered.
I'm grandfathered under the old rules, yes. It's just 2 projects. And I'm grandfathered under the current rules on these projects. Understand that net metering is net metering, and you have a statutory limit for this amount of net metering. And I would say I don't expect that to change, because in the past when we changed net metering, we didn't change it on the people that already had solar. I would find it, it'd be illegal for the legislature or anyone to change the current net metering rules on customers that have already gotten their interconnection agreements and done stuff. So I'm not worried about that. All I'm asking is, if I do create a surplus and say my storage businesses, which I will, so I do a 100 kilowatt facility on a storage building, I'm going to have a positive net meter credit as a customer generator probably every month. And that, I just think that if the goal is to get solar up to this limit, if we've already said we're spending this money on net meter credits, we've already made that decision. And I'm not changing that decision. I'm not increasing that decision. I'm not being a customer generator. I'm a customer generator. And I'll admit that I have a tendency to go into things with both hands. And when I was a builder, I built 350 new construction houses, 7 roads. It was crazy. So I think that I can provide the state with the goals that they've already put in statute. The spirit and intent of the law is to have net metering people and to have more solar on the grid. I have 2 electric cars. My house now uses about 4,500 kilowatts a month. The grid and the utilities are in trouble, folks. If we don't supply more electricity to the grid and utility, we're going to be in trouble. If you think 10% a year and increases in your electric bill, that's timid. We're going to have problems. If you have customers, car dealers, car washes, that are slowly taking their load off. So the load at my house is now 2, 3, 4, 500 kilowatts a month, not 5,000, because I have solar. And I think the other thing that you have to consider macroly is that now we have energy storage in a way that we never had it before. So all this, dinosaur curve, this, that, the technology that I have, I really haven't talked about. It starts at sun comes up, bang, I'm making electricity. Boom, bang, I'm going down. Closing count on the third kind looks exactly like that mountain. The flyer that I hand out, typical solar is a graph, peaks from 11 to 1, goes down. This power stays good till the sun goes down at 7 o'clock at night. So it's fundamentally better and different as real-time sensing, bifacial panels, and because my 1 megawatt project will make 2.2 million kilowatts, 20% of that is 400,000 kilowatts. As a property owner, I have nothing that does 400,000 kilowatts. There's very few properties in my town that use 400,000 kilowatts. If you keep that rule of 20% or have any rule, it's arbitrary. It could be 50, could be 10, could be whatever. But if you keep it, you're essentially saying you can't net meter. You're essentially undermining the existing net metering law through that rule. That's what happened. Because if I consume 10,000 kilowatts and that's 20%, then my biggest system is 100 kilowatts. So that statutory allowed up to 1 megawatt is no longer there. You're only allowed whatever your last year's consumption was, and then once you're doing solar, you don't have that data point anymore. It's gone. You don't have no way to prove or disprove the consumption. You shouldn't have something in rules. So all this law does is it essentially beefs up that word may to say you shall not be required to participate in group net metering. That's it. And that was never the intent of the legislature. And if I am required to participate in group net metering, I will. And I'll pay someone when I do my mega farm, I'm doing it. I bought the land, I got the easement, I've got the interconnection agreement, I've got the line diagram. I want to prove that it's possible to be a customer generator at the 1 megawatt level. I'm not aware that there are any other people that have done that. So I'd like to prove it because that's what the legislature has asked us to do through the passage of their law. So hopefully I can build consensus on this, that the stakeholders will realize that we are just a customer generator, the Department of Energy will realize it, that the Unitel and other, Eversource utilities will want to work with us, and all the stakeholders on everywhere will want to say, hey, this is a reasonable guy asking for a reasonable thing.
Any further questions? Thank you very much for your testimony. And seeing how nobody wants to, you got a question?
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, getting back to the cost issue of different kinds of meters, when you do an installation, is the meter necessary for you to do net metering part of the cost of that installation?
We pay a fee to Eversource of $1,000, and for that, they'll provide a meter. So if it's a smaller system, it can be as little as $150. But essentially, you pay Eversource a fee for the interconnection, and I assume that fee covers the cost of the meter. So you have, Eversource has provided you a regular meter, your building has a meter. They take that meter off, which in theory they could use on any property in their system. They have a meter they can now use. They then put what they call a net meter, and I liked what Senator Gray said, the in and the out. The meters that they put on measure simply the in and the out. So they know what I sent to the grid, and they know what I took from the grid. That already happens, and I believe I'm already paying for that meter. But to answer the spirit of your question, if we had to go to, if you said, I want you to have a smart meter to see when you're using power, when you're sending power, time of day use, all that sort of stuff, happy to pay for a smart meter. I mean, if it's $300 to install a smart meter, and that's part of the fee for the interconnection, I think that's more than reasonable, and I don't think most people would have a problem with that. I paid to upgrade the transformer because that's the transformer. You might have a 15 kilowatt transformer at your house. You're just not going to have 100 kilowatt systems at people's houses. So if you want to upgrade that transformer, it's already law that I pay Eversource to upgrade it. So when I wanted to get a transformer pad set, it cost me $19,000 on one of my projects. I had to say, gee, I need 3-phase 480. I want to do this at my storage facility. They gave me an estimate. We did this. We worked through a work order process. It's very typical for developers. When I was a developer doing subdivisions, I'd cut a check to Eversource, 20, 25 grand. I'd pay for a transformer pad for the neighborhood, and that's the way it works. So I don't think there's any problem, Senator Geider, with developers paying for a smart meter. That's very minor, and I really don't like this. I like that the department says, gee, we can't comment. We don't know what cost shifting is. Appreciate the honesty. I think that anybody who says, oh, cost shifting and light bulb in a field is just trying to undermine the current net metering law. It's not. Don't buy into it, please.
Senator Geider, another question?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm inferring from your discussion that this 20% rule is arbitrary, wasn't scientifically developed, and is actually an impediment to increasing solar net metering and generation in the state. Would that be a safe statement to make?
I think that's a very accurate statement, and that is why I'm here today, asking the legislature to pass a law that will have the effect through rulemaking that they'll look at this new law and say, oh, we can't have this rule anymore, and they'll have to get rid of it. They'll have to look at through rulemaking, oh, we can't pay them once a year, we got to make sure they get paid quarterly. So it's a very strange thing, and as a legislator, I've never seen having to pass a law so you could change a rule. But my point is, when that happens, there's something awry in Denmark.
All right, any further questions? Seeing none, I'm going to close the hearing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Passion is always very welcome. So I guess you're going to be taking a while to this. I'm just going to introduce this. That's about it. How are you, sir? Good to see you. Everybody? You okay with the lights the way they are right now? I am. All right.
We're hearing on Senate Bill 269 FN relative to the New Hampshire Weatherization Program and recognize prime sponsor Senator Avard.
Thank you, Senator. And for the record, I'm Senator Kevin Avard. I represent District 12, and I'm introducing SB 269 FN. And I have a little problem in that when we sent this bill to OLS, they put it in the wrong section. So we have an amendment, and I have not received the amendment yet. But I'd like to at least introduce it. Basically, in theory and hopefully, this bill reduces contractor pre-qualifications for contracts pertaining to New Hampshire weatherization assistant programs and calls for weatherization of pre-purposed buildings such as mill buildings. But the legislation that you have before you right now is incomplete, so we do have some folks here wanting to testify on the intent of what we tried to do, and I'll leave that up to them if that's okay for this purpose. Thank you, Senators.
Any questions from members of the committee? Senator Perkins Cook.
Good morning, gentlemen. I just had a quick question about SB 269. I know basically one of the purposes of the bill is to remove the pre-qualifications for the contractors. Could you just clarify what some of those pre-qualifications are?
I have some experts here who want to jump into that.
Address that? Sure.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
I have a question. When I look at line 27 on page 1, that's section 12P17. Is that mandating weatherization of repurposed structures? It's a state mandate, is that correct?
Show me again one more time where you're at, Senator. Where?
We're at the line 27 on the bottom of page 1.
Mhm.
Section 12P17, weatherization of repurposed buildings. So we are establishing a state mandate. Is that correct?
Shall include weatherization energy efficiency measured required for restoration and repurposing of mill buildings, commercial buildings, residential and multifamily. Yes.
Thank you. Senator Waters.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I co-sponsored this, and I think that we do need to try to find ways to expand the weatherization work and so on. In looking at it, and that sentence that Senator Guida pointed out, I did have a question that, you know, a lot of the weatherization plans are directed towards low income, as the governor wants and others want as well. And I just wonder whether this language that says with equal weight, you know, so you're not trying to, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is your intent here that whatever those other kinds of things, like let's say a mill building is being rehabbed, that is meant to be a kind of housing that is for the low-income folks? Or is it just the market value, or is it can be $1 million condos and the state is paying for the weatherization? I just wanted, I think some clarification that would be helpful.
I think the amendment that's coming will help with a lot of these questions.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Well, hold off. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Further questions? Hearing none, thank you for your testimony.
All right. Do I have my sign-up sheet
I don't
here?
have the sign-up sheet, yeah.
Do I have my sign-up sheet? So just for the record, when another bill comes, I want my sign-up sheet right up here. Okay, thank you. Just like that. Super. Thank you, and you did a great job, Senator Guida. Appreciate that.
Well, it was nothing, really.
All right, so first, I'd like to, Josh, do you want to speak on this?
I'm going to insist this time that Senator Clegg or Matt Gary speak before me because I can do cleanup afterwards.
You're going to insist, okay, insist. All right, Senator Clegg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and I'm glad, Senator, that you took all the questions.
Yeah.
To make this even more complicated, the bill was written for the wrong part of the statute. So what happened was we met with Josh. Josh forgot that he didn't work for the Senate. So what he did was he came over and said, you guys made a mistake. We met with his people yesterday. We're now meeting with the proper people for what we're trying to do. Part of the problem was was lighting, energy efficient lighting and what have you. So Eversource and the people that are involved in that section of weatherization or energy savings has now agreed to meet with us. If you can give us a couple of weeks, because this problem's new to them, not new to us, and we think we can resolve it. We have Josh, we have Eversource, they've all agreed to sit down. I think when we come back, you'll be happy with what we do.
Any questions? Senator, no, you just shut it off. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, and happy. Oh,
I could not let the opportunity pass. So
is
back
my
to my
hair okay?
question.
I'm in front of the camera and stuff.
Same question. And if the amendment will clarify this, I'm going to defer that. But as I read this, it's mandating residential, multifamily, single family, commercial, repurposing mill buildings shall include measures required. Now, is that just stating what's required to weatherize, or is that requiring anyone that upgrades a building to do so?
Well, I don't think it's a mandate. I think, first of all, when you go to the weatherization programs, you're looking to help people who are of lower income. So whether it's the state or whether it's this one, you can't build $1 million condos and expect the energy savings that we have to be paid for out of our utility bills. So there are requirements now, and I think when we're done, what we're looking to do is we're looking to make sure that we can make the most out of all the money that we have. So in some cases, and it's on the state side, we don't include windows, but we're not going to be into that. We would have been on the state side. Windows, the federal government looks at a payback period, and typically the windows don't give us enough of a payback to actually spend the money that we spent. When we're on the other side, we're doing a lot of, maybe we're doing a commercial building over and you're redoing the lighting. There is money for that. You know, years ago when some of the big corporations were coming in when we didn't have jobs, a lot of them were applying for help in order to put energy efficiency lighting in, only to save us, because we know that our generation capacity is sort of peaked. I won't repeat the previous gentleman, but so a lot of it's designed to save us the brownouts. But I don't think we're trying to mandate anything. I think we're trying to say that it should be available. And I think the program runs in a fashion that they make sure that whatever's done is done in the most efficient manner. And I don't mean energy efficient, but in the most efficient based on the dollars we have. I was here for 549, and you know, I'm a big proponent that we continue to. It's only a couple of dollars out of my electric bill, so.
I still read the language as a mandate.
But
Energy efficiency measures required for restoration and repurposing. Required. Measures required is a mandate.
Senator, when we come back, we're gonna have a whole different thing because it's a whole different provision. I mean, that was done by OLS and it was done based on how that works on the state weatherization. This is a different one. Those are total federal dollars that Josh has to handle, so it becomes very difficult.
We'll wait on that amendment. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, Senator.
Happy birthday, Senator.
Thank you. Donna.
Thank you very much. For the record, again, Donna Gamache with Eversource Energy. I'm happy to pass on my testimony today, given what former Senator Clegg has just said. We're happy to work with the stakeholders and come up with something. Our main concern was that inadvertently, the language that is in the bill conflicts with what you just passed in House Bill 549. So we're going to work with them. We feel good. All the stakeholders will be there, and we'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, thank you very much, Donna, and of course, Josh. Matt, did you want to talk?
Yes, sir. Sorry to throw you under the bus there. For the record, Josh Elliott, Director of the Division of Policy and Programs, the Department of Energy. As Senator Clegg mentioned, we met yesterday with him and his folks, again, discovering that their intention was not to touch the weatherization, the low-income weatherization program, or WAP as we affectionately call it, the Department of Energy, which again is targeted towards low-income individuals. The money comes in from the federal government and is dispersed through the county caps. Again, offered our assistance, happy to help to get to the bottom of the problem that his folks are facing. But again, the weatherization program, we said weatherization program, the term is tossed around a lot. In statute, the weatherization program refers to the federal weatherization program run by the department, which is separate than the issue that's at hand here. So with that, the fiscal note, as you may have seen, no longer applies because, again, once this amendment comes, it'll be a much different fiscal note because it won't be impacting this program.
Thank you for the clarification. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Senator.
I don't have anybody else to speak on this unless somebody wants to speak on it. Going once, going twice. Senator Gray.
I'm assuming, Mr. Chair, that you will call another public hearing when we have the actual language of the bill?
Your assumption is correct.
Thank you, sir.
Just recess this then.
Yeah, we will recess this till next time. All right, and I don't have I'm not going to exec the other two bills yet. So with that, do we have another bill coming? Oh, I do.
Yeah, we've got the solid waste.
Oh, yeah. All right, SB 396. Why isn't that in my folder? There it is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Kevin Kavanaugh, Senator from District 16, representing the towns of Bow, Candia, Dunbarton, Hooksett, Manchester Wards 1, 2, and 12. I'm here as the prime sponsor of Senate Bill 396, legislation that requires the Department of Environmental Services to contract with an engineer or hydrogeologist when evaluating a permit for a landfill. When this issue was brought forward last year, we had some outstanding questions regarding the science behind the policy. When I was placed in the Committee of Conference, I made a commitment to bring forward legislation this session that would help us move forward on this critical issue. Our state parks are one of the most significant public assets, and we should take responsible steps to protect the natural beauty that New Hampshire is known for. But we need to do it in a way that is also recognizes the skyrocketing cost of recycling expenses. Understanding that, at times, the Department of Environmental Services has limited access to the necessary resources needed to conduct the kind of analysis outlined in this bill, this legislation puts the cost of the applicant on the applicant for the department to retain an independent licensed professional engineer or hydrogeologist to assist in determining what information is necessary to render the application technically complete. Assessing whether the application meets the requirements for approval and ensuring that the department processes the application in a timely manner. This helps to ensure the thorough process when making a determination about where to site these landfills. I'm not here sitting today as an expert by any means in this topic, just as a legislator hoping to give the experts the tools they need to make the informed decisions in the best interest of the environment and the people of New Hampshire. I did speak with the department yesterday, and they did offer a change from shall to may, and I think there's someone from the department that will be bringing that forward. I'm fine with that. So thank you very much. I'll take any questions.
Question from the committee? Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we obviously had a lot of conversation about landfill siting last year, and you served on the committee of conference on that. And so would it be fair to say that one of the things we ran into last time is that DES and others could give very good answers on surface water issues relating here, but the hydrological ones, when you get down a few hundred feet, where actually at that level might effluents be going? And is that kind of the reason for the recognition from that process of the need to get into the, you know, deeper down?
Yeah, a lot of that, thank you, Senator, too, that last year's just a broad number of 2 miles was, I couldn't really get a science to why that number was brought about. And this, in my part of this is saying, if you give it to an expert that can really dive down to that depth of understanding to what's going to be safest for the surrounding waters or groundwater.
So on line 3, you want to change from shall to may?
Yeah, I think that's the one, but I'll leave it up to the department. I did speak to Mike. He couldn't be here today, but was sending a representative. And I think that's the one, though.
Somebody here to testify from the department?
I will ask. I want to give Senator Susie an opportunity because she's got.
Yeah, we don't need it right now, but is there somebody here?
I don't see anybody yet.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
DES
yeah,
leader,
okay. Good.
If they're not, I can still make that change myself if that's.
No further questions? Thank you very much, Senator. Appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
we'll recognize Senator Susie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Donna Susie, representing Senate District 18, which is Manchester's wards 5 through 9 in the town of Litchfield.
Welcome.
And I am here today in support of Senate Bill 396. I don't want to relive the experience of House Bill 177 because I wasn't in the House. And there are a lot of different concerns that were raised, and we certainly had a lot of debate. But I think the questions that remained following that bill for many of us were, why 2 miles? Why only state parks? And how do we get the best information to make the most informed decisions, recognizing that we have a solid waste issue, but also recognizing we have amazing resources in this state, our parks, our water bodies, that we need to preserve and protect. And how do we strike that balance? I'm very hopeful that with passage of this legislation, we can allow the experts to strike that balance. We can rely on a science and fact-based analysis, considering technology, considering safety, and hydrology, as Senator Waters just mentioned. Those are issues that are really critical that they be explored. We can come down with all kinds of numbers ourselves as policymakers. I'm not a scientist, I'm a lawyer. I don't know where the line should be. I know other states have various lines for various things. North Carolina has 3 different standards near landfills. It's 2 miles if it's a state park, 1 mile if it's game land, 5 miles if it's wildlife. New Jersey has 6 miles. We can look to other states and try to find the right place, but I think what we really need to find is the right number, the right distance, the right fit for each individual situation as it presents. And I think in order to do that, we need to give the department the tools it needs to get those independent experts to do that analysis. And that's why the funding, I think, in this bill is critical, because the department is strapped. We do ask them to do a lot, and this would provide the funding and allow for the expertise to make those important decisions to balance the interests of our state and our people. So with that, I thank you. Happy to answer any questions, and I know you're running behind just like we are in commerce.
Oh, I have a quick question, seeing how you're an attorney. The individuals that probably have already put in their application for permitting and all that kind of stuff, they based basically their whole project on current law. Does this throw a monkey wrench into, say, let's just throw out Dalton for the heck of it? Does this throw a monkey wrench into the application process for there? And if so, what are the long-term repercussions for people that want to?
So I don't think it throws a monkey wrench into existing projects. I think that would depend on the effective date. I do think that it's very important for us as policymakers, although it's one instance that oftentimes brings us to these discussions, I think we have to have a much broader view. That's one circumstance, but there are going to be others in the future. And I think this policy provides the kind of resources and, as I said, ability to do the individual fact-based analysis for any situation that comes up.
Thank you. One final one, just on the line 3 where it says shall, turning that to may is just helpful.
Yeah, I'd be happy to listen to the department's rationale, but as I said, I think the impetus, not speaking for Senator Kavanaugh, but certainly my support for the bill was to ensure that the resources are there to do the necessary studies to protect our resources and yet recognize our needs for disposing of waste in the state.
Thank you, Senator. I know you're busy, so if there are quick questions? Seeing none, thank you very
And
much.
back to the other
Appreciate
committee.
your
Thank you,
testimony,
Mr. Chairman.
Senator.
Thank you, committee members.
And so with that, we will is there a Kirsten here? Did you want to speak?
I wasn't planning to testify.
Okay, thank you. I was kidding, I knew you were. Senator Susie, DES?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Leah McKenna, and I am the solid waste manager.
Can you take the mask
I
off?
sure can.
It's muffling everything.
Sure,
Thank
sure.
you.
My name is Leah McKenna, and I am the Bureau Administrator of the Solid Waste Management Bureau at DES. We are not taking a position on the Senate bill. Rather, we're just going to provide a short response. As we understand it, this bill would require DES to enter into an agreement whereby an applicant for a solid waste facility would be required to hire an engineer or a hydrogeologist to review their permit application. While the assistance of an outside engineer or a hydrogeologist would be beneficial, for example, when DES has a high workload, and especially in cases where you discussed, if there was very specific expertise that we needed for a very specific topic, we would find this beneficial. Our concern lies around the various private consultants speaking on various different permits. So we'd be concerned that there wouldn't be standards. We'd want to make sure that all the standards set by rule and statute are consistently applied. And the way we do that now is by having our in-house hydrogeologists and professional engineers reviewing such permits. We certainly could see value in this bill if it were altered to give DES the discretion of whether or not to compel an applicant to hire external. And we also want to just make note that we assume the bill was intended for landfills. However, the wording of the bill only speaks to permits. So we'd want to make sure that to provide a clarification that this would be permit applications for landfills and not all solid waste facilities.
Dale, make a note of that? Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And so Senator Waters has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. So just to get back to the May here, it just seems appropriate that the department be able to decide, well, you know, we really know the hydrology there already, or we've done enough study of it so that you're not having to do something that you don't feel that you need to do.
Correct.
You get the flexibility with this.
Correct.
Thank you.
Senator,
Careful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I know, you look like.
So if the applicant is paying for this outside expertise, is the applicant getting to choose that outside expertise?
That's how I read this bill, correct.
Okay. And follow up? So I understood you to say that you already have hydrogeologists, at least one, maybe plural,
Yes.
in the department. So
Yes,
this
and-
would
and
be in the event
engineers.
that you were overloaded
Correct.
or had specific
Or
needs?
had-
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Further questions? Senator Perkins Quokka.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify that last point, because I guess I understood it more like a land use process. The department would be hiring the independent engineer to assist the department, so it wouldn't be at the applicant's, the applicant wouldn't choose the engineer. So I just wanted to clarify that, if you knew it. If you don't, then we can get clarity outside
So
of here.
the applicant, for the department to retain at the applicant's expense an independent license. You are correct. I stand corrected. It would be,
Okay,
it would be
okay.
the department that would choose.
Didn't
Thank
mean
you.
to put you
No,
on the
no,
spot.
not
I
at
just
all.
wanted to understand. Okay, thank you very much.
Follow.
So in that the department or the state law is going to require this to be done, why should an applicant pay for that? If the state law requires such an assessment of hydrogeology, why would we not put that on the state to pay for that?
Good question.
Thank you.
Could you repeat that? I want to understand what you just said.
Sure, so the applicant is paying for a service but not getting to choose who provides it. If the state is requiring this study of the hydrogeology to be done as part of the process, then the state should pay for acquiring the talent to do so, and not put that as, if you will, fees on the back of the applicant. If we require it, by golly, we should pay for it.
Senator Gray?
If there's no other land use people in here, it is not unusual in New Hampshire where even on the city or town level, that if a particular expertise or the amount of time and effort that town can submit to, that a independent person be hired at the expense of the person who wants the change that would necessitate that. So there is precedence in law in New Hampshire that cost would be borne by the person who wants to make the change that necessitates the study.
And we can exact all that. But any further questions for our guest? Seeing none, thank you very, very much.
Thank you for your time.
I believe I have Senator Sherman here, wishing to speak. And I do not see Senator Sherman. So with that, does anybody else want to talk about this at all? Seeing nobody, we're going to close the hearing on SB 396FN. And I'm not going to exact anything else right now, unless you're comfortable with this. I want to make the changes, though, unless we do a committee commit.
Whatever you want, Mr. Chairman.
Are you comfortable with this bill that we just heard? Yeah, with the change of may to shall?
Shall to may.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll entertain a motion to move into exec.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. So is there a motion on SB?
Yeah, I'll move up to pass.
Move on to pass by Senator Waters with the,
With the, well, now I'll move a committee amendment to change shall to may.
Second.
on line 3, right?
Yeah.
And discussion.
I will just say one thing. I think potentially this could save a lot of money for developers and everybody concerned, because we get these kinds of questions settled at the application phase. We're not looking at lawsuits later on. We're not looking at this, that, and the other thing. And also, the ultimate result here is that if there are leakages or spills, boy, does it cost a lot of money to remediate those after. So I think it's going to, it's a helpful thing, and we've got a overburdened department and some flexibility with the word may, so I think it's pretty reasonable to say this could be a part of the process.
So one other area that was brought up was the fact that this speaks to permits for lands, not just permits, correct?
It speaks of it being silent. We believe that it would cover all solid waste facilities and not just landfills.
So all solid,
So permitting for incinerators, permitting for transfer stations.
Yeah.
Sure. So,
just for a committee amendment, so we're going to change line 3, but for more clarification, where in the bill do you think we should put the new language with regards to?
Yeah, thanks for remembering that. We need to do that.
With regards to all,
Although it is, if I said, it is may.
yeah,
So
it is May, but
if it goes to May, you would
So if
decide. I mean, if you don't think for an incinerator, no, we don't need to do that, or for
you think the May covers it all?
transfer
Senator,
station,
that gives the department the
of course you
broadest
wouldn't do it.
discretion. I believe we'd be amenable to that.
Did you have a question?
I did.
Yes.
So what happens if the applicant has already hired a hydrogeologist and done a study? Is that automatically discounted if the department decides to want another one?
Well, I assume that would be submitted as part of the application packet.
Can't understand you, I'm sorry.
I assume that would be submitted as part of the application packet to the department. We as a department would then have the discretion to determine whether or not we needed additional information.
Right, what I would like to do is add a clause in here, and maybe we don't exec this today. Because
Let's
if
wait.
a company
Let's wait.
or an applicant has hired it and had it done, okay, then before the department says we're gonna hire it and have you pay for another one, I want it in writing why the existing report is insufficient.
Traditionally, could this happen?
Yes, it has happened.
Senator Gray?
And that happens on the local level also, is that if you have a company come in which the locality feels is biased towards a certain point of view, then they want someone of their choosing to be able to go out and do that. But, you know, these studies, and commenting on the whole bill right now, there was a presentation done yesterday at the Seacoast Cancer Cluster and whatever committee yesterday that had to do with Bedrock Studies around the Coakley landfill, okay? Where you first do preliminary stuff, figure out what you think the flows are, you know, under the ground down at Bedrock. Then you drill wells around there, and you pick one to be the well that you're gonna pump from. You pump from that well for 4 days, constant, while monitoring. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that. And this could be a very expensive thing to do. The question is, and one of the things that the department is gonna have to answer is it justified? And how that prior study that the group may have brought in could be influenced by something else. So
Independent sources.
you are into an area that is going to be long litigated, let's put it that way.
Do you have any suggestions as far as an amendment?
I think that it is proper that these kind of things take place in the bill that we heard last year. That's one of my reasons that I objected to that bill, because that the 2-mile limit, you know, and picking out one particular thing where in Rochester I may have had constituents that lived within 300 yards of a particular landfill, not 2 miles away. But, you know, when we're talking about bedrock and water, I need to know which way the flow is going, not only at the bedrock level, but at the other levels. I need to know the fracturing, you know, in the bedrock to make sure that, you know, how the flows are going. You are.
So with this specific bill, turning it from the Department of Shell to May, giving them more discretion, do you find this bill helpful or hurtful?
I think that they are the proper department to figure out, based on the conditions in the area that we're talking about, what should be done as a preliminary, and then based on those results, figure out where to go from there.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think Senator Guida makes a good point. And I can imagine, you know, that we could have a little bit of language that says that if a previous study has been done, the department must, you know, we could have a standard of reasonableness, must present reasonable reasons, you know, to require this. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Why don't we hold off and we can get some language, maybe the department could provide it to that effect. And I think that would be a helpful amendment.
Who wants to work on the amendment?
I can work on that, it's not a hard one.
Yeah, I think it's a good point.
All right, so is there a motion to move out of exec? Thank you very much for your.
Thank you very much.
Seconded by Senator Guida. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, thank you very much. We're going to close the session. Done. We're done. D-U-N-N. Yeah, I want to talk to Donna real quick. Huh? I just want to, well, I didn't want to lose my train of thought.